City Hall. Earlier this week, Mayor Adams released his plan on ways to curb the rise in gun violence and overall crime in our city. At the same time, the administration has been trying to deal with the ongoing situation at Rikers Island, which has seen surging COVID rates and staffing issues in recent weeks. Some advocates are calling on President Biden to come tour the island when he visits the city next week, as he plans to meet with Adams about gun violence. Joining me now to talk about that and more is Stanley Richards. He's the Executive Vice President of the Fortune Society, a nonprofit organization that provides essential support to the formerly incarcerated. He was previously the first Deputy Commissioner of Programs and Operations at the Department of Correction. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Earl.
In general, what do you make of Mayor Adams' plan?
I think in general, his plan has two elements to it. It has a policing and a prevention and a support element. But it seems like it's weighted way too heavy toward more policing. And we need to have a balanced approach. And I would urge Mayor Adams to do more investments in some of the services and resources he laid out in his plan, like mental health services. When we look at the people who are detained on Rikers, 50% of them have a mental health diagnosis. That jail, that system, has become by de facto a mental health institution, and it shouldn't be. We're not doing our communities any justice, and we're not doing their families any justice, and we're not doing the victims any justice, because that's what perpetuates the cycle of incarceration, and we need to change it. We know what works.
That part is where groups like the Fortune Society come in. You say we know what works. Do we have enough groups that know what to do, and do they have enough capacity to start turning around the thousands and thousands of people who have serious problems like addiction and mental illness and homelessness?
Well, one of the great things about New York is that New York has a vast network of reentry and support services. Fortune is one organization that's been around for 54 years. I am drafting a letter right now to Mayor Adams and President Biden, asking them when President Biden comes to New York, when he goes and he hears about the policing strategies and the gun prevention strategies and the street officer strategy, he needs to come to an organization like Fortune Society and see what reentry housing looks like and how it helps people end the cycle of incarceration, what mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, economic opportunities, what those services look like. And then we need to call on him to do a massive investment in that. In the 1994 crime bill, we invested as a nation millions of dollars in putting more police on the street and doing more enforcement and more incarceration. We need to learn the lesson from that bill and turn the tide and say we need to invest in education, employment, mental health, substance abuse, and housing. Those are the things that'll make communities safe. Those are the things that'll take people off the street who are homeless. Those are the things that'll stop people from cycling in and out of jail.
We showed a graph yesterday on the program, and you're familiar with it. It shows this very steep decline in crime and in gun violence in particular since the mid to late 1990s, all the way down to a bottom around 2018, 2019, and now we started to see it go in the other direction. What is your theory about why that is happening?
Well, I think we're coming, we've been in this isolation mode as a result of COVID. Social service organizations have been stretched. People are traumatized by the experience we have. And I think we're in a space of hopelessness. And I'm hoping that this mayor continues what we've seen happening underneath the Bloomberg administration, continue underneath the de Blasio administration. And I'm hoping and praying that this administration continues the trend to reduce crime, reduce mass incarceration, and make the appropriate investments in services and organizations like Fortune so we could partner with the NYPD, so we can partner with other city agencies. We can partner with communities to help people build new lives and stop the cycle of incarceration.
Last time I spoke to you, I believe you were on Rikers Island as the deputy commissioner there. After your many years of advocacy, what was the biggest surprise you encountered when you were on the other side as deputy commissioner of correction?
I think how bad the facilities are. Those facilities are so old. The weapons that I saw in the facilities, the way people needed to survive, because we had 30% of our 30 to 35% of our members of services, our officers, couldn't work in posts that involved incarcerated people, where I've seen officers who were coming in every day doing doubles and triples and not able to get lunch because other officers were not available. We need to close it, and then we need to bring back officers. So the second thing I would encourage this mayor to do and this administration is to zero in on the number of unstaffed posts we have, because unstaffed posts means that people are in there learning how to survive, and they are surviving because they're making weapons right off of the facilities. The facilities are so old. Two, that means that services can't get in there because there's no officers to escort them. There's no officers in the housing areas to keep the housing areas safe. There's no access to medical care and health care because there's no escort officers. We need to focus on how many of those housing units are staffed. That we need perhaps weekly reporting that tells us, here's the number of open units, here's how many units we have fully staffed, because that's the first thing for safety, for officers and for incarcerated
when
people.
When you say unstaffed, it's sort of startling to hear. The image that comes to mind is, you know, a block where there's basically nobody in charge, or one person, where, you know, if there's an emergency, God forbid, or if there's a need for help or some kind of a response, there's simply nobody there. Is that what you're saying?
Unfortunately, that's the reality. There is an A officer in the bubble, but oftentimes there's no B officer. And some units require a B and a C officer, meaning two officers in the housing unit. And what we've seen is that when there are officer shortages, you're pulling from everywhere. You're pulling from escorts, so services get interrupted. You're pulling from transportation, so transportation is impacted. And you have many, many good officers who are coming in, showing up every day, knowing that because their fellow officers aren't showing up, that they will get stuck. They will end up doing triples and not being able to see their family, won't be able to take breaks. And the most important piece is that it's dangerous for the officers, and it's dangerous for incarcerated people. And so that wouldn't happen in any other agency. If the NYPD had 35% of its officers unavailable to be on the streets, you would hear about it every single day. And we need to hear about it, we need to measure it, and we need to make sure that it ends.
Adams talks about what he calls precision prevention, meaning targeting families and communities where factors that lead to violence and criminal behavior can be detected and either deterred or fixed. If you wanted to give him some suggestions about where to aim his precision prevention, where would you tell him to look?
I think he has to look at the data, and I think he will do that. His police commissioner will do that. And I do appreciate him saying that he is not going to tolerate abuses. He wants every officer who's in that, working in that unit, to have body cameras so we can see all the interactions that's happening. And I think those are good things. But I know he's going to use data. I'm hoping he's going to use data to implement that strategy, but that can't be enough. What he needs to do is have that align with social services, mental health services. So where are the community investments where you can open up a mental health clinic in one of those communities? Where are the investments in organizations like Fortune, where we can open up reentry housing, so when people come home, they don't have to end up in our city shelters, where the cost for housing someone in Fortune is equal to or less than what they get in the city shelter, and the outcomes are much better.
You know, Stanley, here's the thing I don't get. You know, if you're talking about a homeless shelter, or if you're talking about Rikers Island, these are institutions run by the city where you have complete control of the situation. I would think those would be the ideal places to deliver services, because the person is there 24 hours or close to 24 hours. What are we missing here?
No, on Rikers, there are service providers like Fortune that go out there and provide services. That is needed. But it's also needed when they come home. And that's where reentry housing comes in. And Fortune's reentry housing is much more different. It's not a shelter. We define it as a program first that includes housing. There is high expectations for what people should be doing when they are residing with us. There are community meetings. There's expectation that people are going to be involved in 35 hours of productive activity. We have licensed mental health counseling available, substance abuse counseling, all the wraparound services. So what we've built is a community that's centered around housing so people can build new lives and not go back to jail and prison. And that's what we need. But it takes investment. It takes real investment. And I hope when President Biden comes here, he tours Fortune. He sees what the Fortune Academy is like. He sees the impact of reentry housing. He sees what it looks like when you have a multiple points of entry, wrap around lifetime aftercare service model, in addition to the kind of policing strategies and community safety that we need. No one is saying we don't need the police. We need the police. And we thank the police for the work that they do. But this approach can't be one-sided, and it can't be 80-20. It has to be something like 60-40, where 40% is about policing and 60% is about investments with mental health, substance abuse, housing, employment.
Okay, this discussion will continue another time. Thanks so much for your insights, Stanley Richards.